We have great water in California. We meet a lot of the environmental standards for drinking water. One of the biggest topics in drinking water right now is lead. In California, we really don't have a lot of lead in our water system, and that's because of the time period that we built. They had finally realized, we shouldn't be using lead pipes, and so we have a few fixtures here and there, but that's going to be our next big push for us, especially here in Northern California. I mean, we're getting pristine runoff from Tahoe that's coming down the mountains everywhere. Everything that is coming out of your tap, if you're without large utility, is safe to drink.
Hello and welcome again to another episode of Sacktown Talks. Today we're glad to be joined by Jennifer Capitolo, Executive Director of the California Water Association. Jennifer, how's it going? Thanks for coming.
Yeah, great. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, for those who don't know, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got to be Executive Director?
Sure. So I've been Executive Director for about 3.5 years now. I was the contract lobbyist for California Water Association for 8 years before that when I was at the Nossaman firm. And the executive director of CWA was ready to retire and they were looking for someone new. And a couple of times I said, no, I'm not the right fit. No, I'm not the right fit. And after lots of cajoling from the presidents, they said, please come over and take over as executive director. So I joined at a really unique time, right before the pandemic. I started January 2020.
Oh, right.
And I have to tell you what's so funny is my biggest fear about the job was the travel. And I had tiny kids at the time.
Right.
And I said, I don't want to travel. It's impossible. And then the pandemic hit and I didn't have to travel for 3.5 years. So travel's coming back now. And I'm traveling nationally 4 or 5 times a year to attend national conferences. And then a lot of travel across California to visit our 93 members. So.
No international
No, thank
conferences?
goodness.
No.
Thank goodness. Though we do have a lot to learn about water from the international community, but no international travel yet.
Yeah, not yet.
Yeah.
So what is the main difference between being an in-house executive director and being a contract lobby?
Well, I thought I was going to hate it. And that's another reason why at first I was like, I absolutely don't want to do this. Because, as a contract lobbyist, you're constantly working on all different things. Right. And I was working on housing and transportation and local government issues and water. And I thought, oh gosh, going in-house, I'm going to be stuck doing water policy all the time and nothing else. And it's not the case at all. It's still that scatterbrained, approach and working on all sorts of different things. It's just within one organization. So I'm running our communication strategy, our public affairs. I'm managing our lobbyists. I'm managing our legal team. I'm, all the things that have to go into running a statewide association. I'm the gal. So
yeah. And so, I guess you have a little more control about, what's going on and the messaging and stuff like that. How are you liking the change?
Yeah, I like it a lot. I think the thing that really makes the difference is that I love my members. The people I work for, just solid. The work that we're doing, I can really find a lot of pride in going to work every day. All I'm trying to do is to make sure everyone has access to safe drinking water. What could be better than that?
Yeah, I know. It sounds like a pretty good goal. So what is the California Water Association? How long has it been around and kind of how to get started?
Yeah, we're getting close to being around for 100 years, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. We are a statewide association representing all of the investor-owned water utilities in California. So it's a monopoly. It's about 15% of drinking water service in California is delivered by investor-owned utilities. The other 85% is delivered mostly by public agencies. There's a little teeny tiny contingent delivered by mutual water agencies, but they're smaller than 1%, so not the significant group of water utilities. So for us, we're regulated by the Public Utilities Commission. That's really what sets us apart from public agencies. In a public agency setting, you have a board that's elected, or you have a city council that's making the decisions about how the water utility operates. Right. With us, we've got shareholders and executive teams of presidents and vice presidents that are making decisions. And then our governing body really is the Public Utilities Commission, who tells us, yes, you can do that. No, you can't. Here's what you can charge for rates. Here's what, got to take that out. We're not going to charge that through to customers.
It's like pretty interesting because we all know about power. We have PG&E, we have SMUD, you have Sempra. You have 10 companies statewide or, local municipalities who do power. Water, we have no idea who brings us our water.
There's
water bill.
7,500 water utilities in the state of California. There's 3 main energy utilities.
Wow. How does
crazy,
that work?
Right?
By the way, yeah.
Yeah, it's really just a story of California development. And I get asked a lot, like, why are there even investor-owned utilities? Isn't water utility a public service? But really, if you think about it, and utilities at their core were really an infrastructure investment.
Right.
That's what we do. We replace pipeline. We build treatment plants to make sure that water service can get to everyone. You turn on your tap, it comes out. But it doesn't need to be done in a public agency model. Other states, it's a majority private. There are certain nations and other countries where it's all privately owned water utilities. But it's a similar market, of going out and finding investors and, putting infrastructure on the ground, giving the rate of return to whoever it is. For us, it is our shareholders. For municipalities, it's the municipal bond market too.
So is it just water delivery, or is there sewer involved? And
we don't really have regulated wastewater in California. We have a few. Maybe we have 6 utilities doing regulated wastewater. But for the most part, it's drinking water. But that's different. In other parts of the state, there is also regulated wastewater as well.
Yeah, I remember we had a guest on, and she was talking about the future of tap to toilet.
Yeah.
And you just kind of cycle it all the way back from the end to beginning, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I have a board member who loves to say, like, we have a finite amount of water on our planet Earth. So essentially we are drinking dinosaur pee. I mean, it's been around that long. It's just getting recycled through our system in all these different ways. So yeah, through any kind of recycled water or desalination, we're just forcing that recycle process to happen faster.
Yeah. So, I guess it's pretty interesting is water in the state and kind of regionally is different everywhere. And like in my neighborhood, they're finally just getting metered.
I know.
And, it's causing a big uproar. People are really nervous, ripping out their lawns and stuff. And I'm like, really? You think it's going to be that bad, that different? Kind of what is the state of water right now? And kind of, in every region. And we just had all this rain and people are kind of thinking, I guess we're set now for good. When a couple, I don't know, maybe 9 months ago, we were a pretty dire spot.
Yeah, right.
So,
well, the new campaign that we're all working on, hopefully all of you have seen it, is it's the Save Our Water campaign. But it's for the love of water. Let's make water conservation a way of life. So that's really what we're moving into, right? It's like we're in crisis and we ask people to conserve, but now long term, we're looking for water use efficiency. So let's do all those things that we need to do to try to use less water overall, because we know that we're going to have those pressures in the future of conservation. So it's a big thing that we're working on right now, is keeping up the messaging that there is pressure on our water system and that we do still need to be looking at supply. We're looking at long-term supply. We're looking at individual, storage projects, groundwater projects, but also coming back to the customer and saying, let's look at lawn, let's look at drip irrigation, all those things that we've really tried to do, but just doubling our efforts to make sure everything that we can do can be done.
It's always interesting talking to utility folks about kind of the rural areas. And, we talked about broadband and, some areas don't have broadband. Now we have broadband for all. Some areas didn't have power, very good power. Utility companies have to go out there, phone lines, things like that. Water, the thing we hear about water, especially in the Central Valley, is there's like communities in the Central Valley that don't have safe drinking water, loaded with chromium 6 and all this kind of dangerous stuff. And they're literally like shipping in like bottled water to some of these communities.
And you think about that environmental impact of like delivering that much bottled water. I mean, there's just, where's all that plastic going into the landfill too?
Boxed,
so yes, right. No, I would say that's a huge part of what I spend my time working on. So both the Public Utilities Commission and the State Water Board both have initiatives right now to try to consolidate small failing systems. So we're trying to take those small drinking water systems and find a new ownership structure for them. And whether that's going into an investor-owned utility or if it's going into a public agency, or in some cases it's called regionalization, where we'll bring together 8 or 10 failing systems, give them economies of scale, make sure they have more customers, and then be able to give them some grant funding to get their organizational structure back together. But that's a huge initiative for us. And even in our field in investor-owned utilities, we have small utilities in our membership that don't want to exist anymore. They're aging owners. They want to get out of the water utility business. And it's really hard to find homes for them. So we're doing a lot of work of trying to bring resources to them, connect them with the water board. There's a proceeding open right now with the Public Utilities Commission on how to handle acquisitions of water systems, whether that's someone acquiring an investor-owned water utility or an investor-owned water utility acquiring someone else.
Because that's the interesting thing, like in power, right? We have the big companies, they have the big scale, and they make money, obviously, because they're still in business. Yeah. Even though they've had tons of problems and disasters and things like that, they weather through. Water, as you said, there's water companies, water utilities for sale, and no one's taking them. Why is that?
Yeah. Well, I think these are very, very small businesses, and they're mostly out in rural parts of California. So the attraction is just really not there. My large investor-owned utilities are a whole different story. Those are publicly traded companies. A lot of CalPERS and CalSTRS, that's retirements are invested in these very large publicly traded companies. So they're in a very different situation. And sometimes they have capacity to take on some of these small failing systems, but they also have to think about their economies of scale. So for example, if one's headquartered in San Jose, they're not going to buy a system that's out in, Tahoe. We have a lot of small systems out in Tahoe, because it just doesn't make sense for their employees to have to drive that far. So we really if we're consolidating into our system, we're looking what's close to us, what's manageable, how far can our employees really travel to be able to manage those systems. But getting back to what you said, it's funny, like you think about PG&E and Edison and SDG&E, like they're massive, right? 3 that represent the majority of the
name
state.
brands, right? Yeah.
And at some point we were talking, the news chatter of like trying to break up PG&E, like in the water utility industry. We're doing the exact opposite of that, right? We're trying to bring as many of these little teeny tiny smalls together so that we can get those same PG&E economies of scale that they have there.
Like, what's a water company that might be a name brand? Like, would we know any of your members?
I don't know. My largest member is called California Water Service Company, and they serve about a little over 2 million people in California. They're what's called a multi-district company, so they're all over the state. They are as far north, I suppose, as like Marysville, Orville, and then they go south on Rancho Palos Verdes. And they're all kind of mixed in between. They're Stockton and Bakersfield and South San Francisco. They're kind of spread out all over.
So it's not like a region, kind of like
no, but some of them are. San Jose Water Company
this whole county,
is one, and they have majority of the water service in Santa Clara County.
Yeah. So who does our water here in Sacramento?
In Sacramento we have 2 investor-owned water utilities. One is called Golden State Water Company, and they serve a portion of the Arden area. My kid's school is Golden State Water territory. And then they serve half of Rancho Cordova and Gold River. And then we have another water utility here called California American Water Company. And that one also serves a little bit of the Arden area, some of South Sac, some of Rancho Cordova. And then they're up near Placer County as well.
Okay, interesting. Yeah. And so people are coming around to I guess paying for water. And, you said the Public Utilities Commission, sets or oversees the rates. Yeah. Kind of what are the rates like statewide? Is it cheaper for water in some areas versus other areas?
The statewide average right now is around $70 a month for water service. And it's a little bit confusing to some people about when they write the check every month, because a lot of times the water and the wastewater will be on a single bill. But really just looking at drinking water service is about $70 a month. And if you think about that, that's actually a bargain of you are ingesting that every single day.
Right.
And if you compare it to bottled water, I think it's 0.06 cents for water to come out of your tap versus you buying bottled water, what the differential is. So it's pretty insane if you think about, what you're getting out of it. That's one thing that we've been working on lately, is trying to distinguish this affordability concept. A lot of times people want to compare us to other utilities like energy utilities, and we think our affordability savings is back to bottled water. It's like, how much would someone pay for bottled water if they couldn't drink their tap water? Versus, educating them that what's coming out of the tap really is safe, and that's what they should be relying on.
Yeah, I guess there's like this kind of perception that what comes out of the tap isn't good to drink. It doesn't taste good. It's filled with stuff. Yeah. You need to filter it. You need the Brita. You need the fridge to take care of it. Kind of what is like the statewide consistency of water, and kind of like what comes out the tap?
We have great water in California. We really do. And we really do meet a lot of the environmental standards for drinking water. And part of it is that California was built so much later than the rest of the U.S. So one of the biggest topics in drinking water right now is lead. In California, we really don't have a lot of lead in our water system. And that's because of the time period that we built. Right. They had finally realized, we shouldn't be using lead pipes. And so we have a few fixtures here and there, but that's going to be our next big push for us. But especially here in Northern California, I mean, we're getting pristine runoff from Tahoe that's coming down the mountains. There's other places like Los Angeles or some parts of the LA basin where you have former Superfund sites. But water utilities, I mean, we've got treatment everywhere. Everything that is coming out of your tap, if you're with a large utility, is safe to drink. I mean, I sort of worry sometimes about when I go on vacation and I'm VRBOing out in the middle of nowhere in a house that's on a private well. That's kind of where I start to worry, like, who's overseeing that? There's no professional utility that's going out and checking that on a regular basis. It's kind of scary.
Someone who grew up on well water, we always were taught that it was healthier, had minerals in it.
But who was managing it there, right? How often were you testing it?
Yeah, never.
And especially in agricultural areas, that's where you're going to see right now most of the runoff. Like you said, Chrome 6 is naturally occurring as well. So that can kind of be anywhere in the state.
I remember this one, when I worked in the Attorney General's office, I had this one case, this environmental group sued a water district because of the liners of dairies. And they were saying that I guess dairies have these big ponds of waste.
Yes, they do.
From the cows, something you never think about. And there's liners that prevent them from sinking in the groundwater. And in the Central Valley, you have a lot of cows out there, a lot of poop. A lot of that poop seeping in the groundwater. There's something called like blue baby syndrome, something I'd never even heard
of. That's nitrates, yep.
Yeah, and it's like something you never think of someone just kind of, living that, I guess our groundwater is...
Yeah, and that's why, when we look at the list of the failing systems that are left in California, they're in these areas, small communities in the Central Valley that just really struggle with raising rates enough to be able to cover those associated costs.
So what can be done, I guess, in those communities? You have to pipe it in from somewhere else? Is there more filtration?
Install treatment. Yep. So the State Water Board has a big program right now called the SAFER program. And the SAFER program, one of the elements of it is consolidation, or they also call it water partnerships, where a partnership is where you still exist, you just partner with a neighboring utility. But consolidation is when you fail to exist anymore and you completely merge with a neighboring system who comes in and manages your system. So that's how they're really trying to resolve it. And the governor's continually put money into this SAFER program. We use some greenhouse gas emission reduction funds also to help with this. There's a fascinating study out there that came out at CARB about how consolidating small failing systems does reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So they've been able to justify the use of these funds to help small systems. So
it's interesting. Like, I know a couple of years ago, you started hearing about these like nonprofits that would go to like Africa or South America, and they'd build like a little well for this village, and all of a sudden these people, who are going miles and miles for water now have water, and their life changes. And how like easy it is. Water is like one of the most simple things, basic things you can provide for somebody and totally change their life.
Yeah,
and it's just kind of crazy here in
why can't we figure it out?
The fourth largest economy in the world. We haven't even taken care of home yet. And so how far, how many more years do we need before we figure this out?
I was just
how far away are we?
Yeah, I was looking on the Water Board's website this year, and since the beginning of the SAFER program, which I think it's been 4 years now, they've consolidated 90 water systems. And who's sitting they call it the human right to water list. That's who is still failing.
Kind of like we had broadband for all. What about water for all?
Right.
Safe drinking water for all.
So those 360 systems that kind of hover on and off of compliance, that's still we have to tackle. But those are, the hardest to resolve because they're in small rural areas. So just getting out there and finding someone who has the capacity to take them over. And we always struggle, throwing grant money at bad. Like, if it's failing, why are we going to incentivize them with grant money? We need to come up with a solution, a long-term solution, not a short-term Band-Aid. So I think that's some of it as well. There's some stories at the Water Board about where they've built a treatment plant, but then that community that lived there couldn't afford the rates to be able to run that treatment plant. So there's a lot of dynamics. It's not just getting the treatment plant in the ground. You also have to look at that long-term O&M, and you have to have the professional water folks who can come in and manage that system to the level it needs to be managed. And that's hard in rural areas.
Well, it was pretty interesting. We've had Melissa Hurtado on before.
Yeah.
And she loves talking about water and the complications of water.
Yes.
How you have, State Water Board, you have like little regional boards, and it's a very kind of a regulatory maze. And then I guess, are you just like drinking water, or you do ag water as well?
Just drinking water. Yep. And if, back to that is like, we're duly regulated. We are the only utility service that is duly regulated. So energy is only regulated by the Public Utilities Commission, but water is regulated by both the State Water Board and the Public Utilities Commission.
Wow.
So it's always interesting when you have two regulatory agencies that aren't always on the same page about things.
Right.
So the water board's like, consolidate, take every small failing system, investor-owned utilities be the solution to the problem. And the Public Utilities Commission is like, well, let's take a year and figure out some rules about how we're going to do this and whether it makes sense or not for all the ratepayers. I mean, we need the balance of it, but it's hard when they're not always on the same
page. So who
page.
deems like, okay, we just got a bunch of water, right? So, and then, just love driving through the Central Valley, and all the farmers want more water. Environmentalists want water for fish and animals. And then here's you, I guess the third party who needs water for us, right?
Drinking water has a priority. There are laws in place that say, highest and best use is, we need to keep people alive. So they need water to drink.
But I guess we have drinking water, right? But I guess you also provide the water for our sprinklers.
Yes.
And our swimming pools.
Yes.
Right?
Right.
So,
that's going to be interesting over the next couple of years, is this whole concept of making conservation a way of life. So a couple bills were passed years ago, and they're still going through the implementation process. And it will essentially create a budget for every single utility to implement with its customers of how much you can use indoor and how much you can use outdoor. And there's some fascinating new technology coming on the market where you can hook it up to your system, and it'll know, oh, you took a shower. Oh, you ran a load of laundry. Oh, you've been running your dishwasher every single day after you eat dinner or whatever. And it'll recommend to you different ways based on really just that intelligence of monitoring your usage, where you can save water.
So I think legally everyone in the state has to be metered by next year?
Yeah. Right.
So have you guys been looking at data over the past couple of years? I guess our population's kind of plateaued here, maybe gone down a little bit. Are we using less water than we did 10 years ago?
We are definitely using less water. And the nice thing is when we do these big, huge conservation pushes, we don't see water usage increase when we stop that messaging. We see people adapt to that way of life, and they're kind of staying steady and their reduced water usage year to year. At some point, the hardening, how much more can we possibly conserve? There's always that fear out there that we can't do too much more, but there are a lot of areas that we haven't even touched yet. And I'll give you one example is apartment complexes are a fascinating study. And we're doing our first pilot project, the investor-owned utilities are to try to tackle renters. So renters are not customers of water utilities. We have zero relationship with them. So you think about how many people live in an apartment complex in California, quite a few, and they're getting zero conservation messaging. It's incumbent on their landlord to tell them to conserve because the landlord's the one that pays the bill. So we're trying to form a relationship now with renters where, one, the carrot is we can offer them low-income rate assistance programs. That's one thing that's really unique about investor-owned utilities is the PUC allows us to offer discounts to low-income people. Public agencies have Prop 218 issues and have a really hard time doing it. Some of them have figured it out, but it's a really hard place to go. But now we're wrapping conservation messaging into that too. So if we can get them into our programs, then we can start marketing conservation programs to them as well. And there was a bill earlier this year who kind of took that concept, and they also did it for commercial buildings. So this building that we're sitting in right now, your landlord pays the water bill, not you. So you don't know what your usage is. And it was trying to figure out a way to break down usage by each suite so that you could be communicated to and understand what your usage was. So I think we're going to become smarter. Water technology is so slow.
Really?
Of what's, sexy to work on. It's not water conservation technology.
Tell us what's out there. Low flush toilets?
Yeah. We've pretty much done everything we can do on shower heads and toilets. That's kind of over. Now it's this whole
Did you take the ring out of your shower head?
I have where you can turn it up or down of what the water pressure is. I actually am like one of those unique people in the world. I actually don't like really hard water pressure. My husband loves water pressure, so we just have the big regulator. I guess that's what that's called. Yeah.
That's good. I thought you were going to come out and tell everyone you're a bath person.
But no, I don't even have a bathtub in my house. It's crazy.
Are baths more water conscious or less?
That's one thing I learned a couple droughts ago. The swimming pool industry was calling me and they were like, they're telling us we can't fill pools. And they had a study done and it showed that having a swimming pool uses less water than watering your grass every day through the summer. That's interesting, right?
Wow, that is interesting. Good study. I'm sure that was a good study.
I know, right? Who paid for that? I know.
Yeah. It was just kind of like the American Beverage Association came out with a study that said aspartame and Diet Coke is totally fine for you.
Yeah.
And I was like, thank God.
Yeah, right.
Great. That's my favorite.
Oh, no, you're a Diet Coke guy? Yeah. At least you're not a bottled water guy. No.
Yeah. So kind of back to that bottled water, like, there's all this stuff, especially on Twitter now. We're always, we're worried about vaccines. We're worried about all this stuff that we didn't think about before. But now we're worried about our water, and there's fluoride in our water, and there's chlorine in our water, and Lord knows what else. So people are just like, oh, you can't drink. Stay away from tap water.
Right.
Kind of what is in our water, and who decides what's in our water? And
well, we have two environmental regulators.
Is it good for us or not?
Yeah. The US EPA sets most of the standards for what can and can't be in water. Right. And then we also have the overlay of the State Water Board. And I'll say State Water Board, they're pretty progressive. And it's actually done by a branch under Cal EPA called OEHA, Office of Environmental Health Hazard, something like that. And they set what's called MCLs, maximum contaminant levels of how much of whatever can be in your drinking water. And just since I started working in the water utility industry 10 years or so, they like more and more and more. And the labs are being able to test to lower levels and the treatment plants are being able to treat to lower levels. And so now we're getting into this world of like, they call it non-detect, where nothing is in there. And that's what we're getting to is like, we can treat to really low levels now to be able to get people the safest, cleanest drinking water possible. But I counter that too. I just got asked a question and I have to actually do some research on it. But one of the public utilities commissioners, we were talking more about this whole bottled water thing of their BPAs or other plastic-like elements within bottled waters. And we've been talking a lot about that lately of like, even I think you mentioned, the fridge thing, you get it out of the filter. Like if you're not changing that, it's disgusting. Like all kinds of mold and slime and yuckiness will all get into that system as well. And if you think about it, a water utility, that water is constantly moving. We're constantly checking that. We're constantly cleaning it. The things that you're worried about, fluoride and chlorine or whatever else, like we're monitoring and watching all of that. Where what's coming out of that fridge filter, no one's going in there and seeing if there's all kinds of icky mold that has grown inside of there. So, I mean, we have the filter for our fridge. My kids like cold water, but they like to have, I know. So they like to have the filter, but it comes on Amazon on a subscribe basis. So I know to change it every time it comes in the mail. So trying to stay on top of it. But, there's risks everywhere in life and you have to decide what you're comfortable with. But as drinking water utilities, that's our sole purpose in life is to make sure that you have drinking water that is safe. That's our number one priority, reliable, that when you turn on the tap, it comes out and that it's affordable, that you can afford to pay for something that you need to live.
Right. So that's interesting. I think there's a belief that like the utilities put stuff in the water. Is that going on? Are you guys adding stuff that you guys think we need to be
absolutely
healthy and happy?
I haven't had them lately. I think it's less of the fluoride debate, whether that should be in drinking water or not. But yeah, I mean, that's something that we add. We also like anytime any kind of, something pops up, chlorine is definitely something that people put in the water. To make sure that any kind of organic materials that shouldn't be in there that could make you sick are essentially, gone. And I don't know a ton about the science of water, of, exactly what chemicals do what, but they have to be at certain levels when it comes into your cup that you're filling up at your tap. they have to be at these levels, right, that are safe to drink.
Right.
So that is regulated. Someone tells us what that number looks like.
It's funny. There used to be like a water store by my house, and I would see how packed it was. And I went in there one time, and I was like, "What is going on here?"
Yeah.
And these people buy these like whole house systems with filters, reverse osmosis, positive ion, and they're spending thousands and thousands of dollars.
And it's sad.
Is it?
There's
is that just nonsense?
Yeah.
Is that what you guys are already doing?
Yes, I know. Right. That's what we're doing. Yes. So you're doubly doing it. And sometimes those machines that are like attached to grocery stores or mini marts or whatever, it's just hooked up to our line. There's nothing else that's going on in there. They're just giving you our water in a convenient container to take home with you. But I do want to say, too, is that there's some great studies out there. And there's a researcher out of University of Wisconsin who just recently wrote a book that those bottled water and the vended water stations, they market and target immigrant populations, low-income populations, African-American communities. It's like targeted to lower-income folks. So when you're paying hundreds of times more for this vended and bottled water than you are what's coming out of your tap, and it's similar, then is that fair that they're targeting lower income people? And especially immigrant communities, folks that moved to the U.S. and lived in a country where they couldn't drink the water, they think that's the only way of life. And so our job as water utilities is to educate them, to make them feel comfortable with drinking the tap water that's coming out.
Okay. And how's that going? How are you guys reaching these people? And
yeah, we just did a panel with UC Berkeley. They have a whole department in their public health department that's working to promote tap water. And it's an I Heart Tap Water campaign. And it's hard. I mean, it's really hard to change people's beliefs about things.
That's funny. I went to a funeral yesterday, and this gentleman's sister gave the eulogy, and they were born in the late 40s. And they talked about growing up in the 60s and how daredevils they were and how they used to drink water out of the hose.
I drank water out of the hose as a kid. It's always so funny. Like,
everyone's
that's not a normal thing.
That's wild. But from what you're telling me, it's not. It's totally.
It did always taste weird coming out of the hose. And I don't know what the hose has, like
rubber hose,
weird plastic and metal. I don't know, but yes.
So the water coming out of your outdoor faucet, same as the indoor faucet, just as effective.
My funny story is all the time my kids are always like, I don't want water out of the bathroom sink. It's weird. And I only want water out of the kitchen sink. And so one day I just overheard my youngest telling this to someone else of like, no, our mom, she works for the water utility. So we get the good water in both the kitchen sink and the bathroom sink. He has no idea it's the exact same water, but for some reason, I'm special there.
Yeah. Wow. That's good. Can you come over to my house
and
fix all my faucets? That's pretty good. So, we're having an interesting, kind of year kind of turnover here. We have a big a Senate open seat. Possibly. We're all thinking Dianne Feinstein sitting down. And Barbara Lee's thrown her hat into the ring to run for Senate. And you worked for her at one time.
Yeah, I did. So I started my career with Governor Gray Davis back in 2002, which seems kind of crazy.
21 years ago.
Yes, I know. And when the recall happened, I just had to find another job, right? And so
so you were like in an appointed position? Or?
Yeah, I was working at Department of Finance, and I was doing budgets for alcohol and drug and mental health. And I'm a social worker by background. It's something that's pretty unique to working in lobbying and advocacy, and now even working in the water world. But Barbara Lee is a social worker. My mentor at Department of Finance at that time, he's a social worker as well. And so we kind of had this group, and she ended up picking me up out of the recall, and I went to work for her. And one thing that's interesting, remember Assemblyman Sandre Swanson? He was her chief of staff. So he was my boss when I worked for Barbara Lee, our small world. But yeah, she was incredible. And I worked with her. If you remember that 20 years ago, she was the lone vote on giving authorization to go to war. And she kind of stood alone. And it was an amazingly interesting place to work at the time because she was getting all these threats and we're having to answer the phone and the email and like, where am I working? And just, we
had armed guards at the Bay Bridge.
Yeah, right. My small world. I mean, I've lived in Hawaii and I've lived in a rural part of Colorado too over my life. And so moving to the Bay Area it was just like totally eye-opening to me, and then getting involved in this like very liberal politics. And I learned a lot from her, but she'd be a great candidate. I mean, she's very smart, very committed. And a lot of the issues I care about are her priorities too, of really making California a better place to live for everyone.
Yeah. So how'd you go? Like when did you graduate from college, and how did you get into the
I graduated in 2000 from Colorado State. I worked for 1 year as a social worker, and doing direct service in Colorado. Really? And I was like, oh, this isn't for me. I did one public policy type of project as a social worker, community organizing, immigrant women who didn't have access to prenatal care, even though their babies were going to be born in the U.S. and be U.S. citizens. And I was like, this is cool. Like, you can make real policy change, just a single person, bringing people together. So when I went back to grad school, I went to Berkeley, and I focused my master's degree on management planning and policy. So did most of my internships in public policy types of places. I did a little bit of research and worked on some local organizing campaigns there too. So after I graduated, that's when I was working in the Davis administration towards the end of my last year of graduate school. And then hopped to Ellen Corbett for a really short period of time when she was in the assembly, then to Barbara Lee. And then very quickly I started contract lobbying. So I moved into contract lobbying probably, 2006, 2007. And I was at Townsend Public Affairs for about 7 years, and I was at Nossaman for 8 years or so. And I've been at this gig now.
So how'd you fall into this kind of this water niche, this utility specialty?
I always laugh, like I never, ever thought that I would be doing water policy. Right. It was never an interest
Social
of mine. I know.
Yeah.
Healthcare, alcohol and drug, mental health, like that's kind of what I had worked on previously. But yeah, when I moved over to Nossaman, there was a gal there, Meg Hetzenbrown, who was getting ready to retire. And she said, I have this great set of clients. Do you want to take them over? And
like,
sure. I know. I always thought I was, I'm a social worker. I only work on affordable housing and low-income food programs. Now, right? And that's what I wanted to work on, but ended up in water, and I love it. It's really been absolutely great. But she did a great job mentoring me. Nossaman had represented these regulated water utilities. They'd been part of founding the association, going way back. I don't know if you remember Bill Bagley. We have legislation or laws, Bagley-Keene, named after him. But he was a partner at Nossaman for years, and he actually founded California Water Association back in the day.
100 years ago.
I know, right?
Is that what you said?
We've been around almost that long. It's kind of crazy. We are I think it's 82 years our association has existed. And
so the 100-year party is
but it started out as a good old boys club, right? Like they were just having lunch once a month, and then they started formalizing themselves. And then Bill, he really pulled them together and founded the association and did the bylaws. They only have had an executive director about 20 years or so. The person who was there previous to me, and I'm just their second executive director. So.
Yeah. So, as a contract lobbyist, you're in the Capitol a lot, you're in the, the swing space, dealing with members. Kind of, are you still doing that as an ED?
A little
are you
bit.
In the building as much?
Yeah, a little bit. We hired another contract lobbying firm to take over the day-to-day of things, but I still get pulled in because, who knows the most about regulated water utilities, so. Yeah, not as much as I like to be. And it's actually okay with me. I thought, again, I thought it was going to be boring. I wasn't going to get all this face-to-face, but I'm finding other ways to make it work.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So, last year we had this $100 billion surplus. And I was like, with that much money, you think you could solve one big problem. And, they just ended up spreading it everywhere, put Band-Aids on things. We've had Alex Baring on here a few times from the Fremont Water Authority and talked a lot about kind of moving water and how kind of water storage is looking like. Kind of in your opinion, kind of what is the water storage situation here in California, and what can we do to kind of improve it?
Yeah, well, it's funny as the drinking water providers, we rely a lot on folks like Alex and other big wholesale providers to help solve the big, huge storage problems of the state. But we are supportive of that. Like I said, it has to be a two-first solution. It can't be all on the back of the customers to conserve. It also has to be an approach where we're just finding more places to store fresh drinking water that we can use for all of these different purposes, ag, environment, and people. Yeah.
That's the three main ones.
Fish and birds.
Yeah.
Ag and people. Yep. And so I think that the whole Delta Conveyance project that's going on right now, that's an interesting one for us because we serve folks in Northern California. We serve folks in Southern California. We serve folks in the Delta communities. And so our position on that has had to stay fairly neutral. I mean, overall, we support new supply and moving of water to meet all the demands of the state. But at the same time, we've got to make sure that we're protecting our communities and our most vulnerable communities in some instances, like the Delta communities.
Yeah. Well, I guess what's interesting about like California, and maybe we don't have the data on this just yet, but there's, it's always been mainly a desert, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we get we've always got these big, atmospheric rivers that provide us with plenty of water, and then we go plenty of time without water.
Yeah.
Have you guys as you said, we're using less and less water. There's kind of this belief with climate change that we're going to be getting less and less water.
Mm-hmm.
Is that kind of the reality that you guys are seeing with the stats and kind of the statistics that like for the past 50 years we're getting less water? And
yeah, one of our water utilities did this really innovative study. I had him presented at a conference a couple months ago, and it was the first time I'd heard the presentation of the study. And they did 100-year climate study. Mm-hmm. Where they looked at what all the threats from climate change could be over the next 100 years to providing safe drinking water service. And they did a 10-year snapshot, a mid-century snapshot, and then the 100-year snapshot. And they brought in all these different consultants to look at it in all different ways. And it's really scary.
Yeah.
We've got to figure some of this out to be able to have the drinking water supply we need. On a totally different note, there was an article yesterday that I just again, my brain was spinning for hours after I read it about how we're pumping so much groundwater and bringing it to the surface that it was previously towards the core of the earth, that the earth is now starting to spin differently on its axis. Isn't that fascinating? I mean, I
was just worried about the Central Valley where they're talking about communities imploding.
Yeah, the sinks. Wow, I mean, now it's the whole entire Earth is spinning different on its axis because the weight of water is being redistributed from the ground to the surface. And I'm like, oh God, another thing to worry about.
Wow. Yeah. So everyone's obviously the ocean has too much water.
Right. We have a desal project.
Take it back in.
It finally got approved.
And, put it back in the ground somehow.
Yeah. California American is one of my member companies, and they have been working for 25 years to get a desal project approved in Monterey County. And Monterey County is a unique place. It doesn't have...
we talked to somebody from there, and they're desal doesn't make sense because that's the big tap to toilet.
Yeah, they just got it approved.
Yeah.
So they just got it approved in the Coastal Commission this last year, and they're moving forward with a downsized project. Mm-hmm. But they don't get water from the State Water Project or the Central Valley Project. They really are kind of this strangely isolated place. So they've got to have desal as a solution down there. But it's kind of a multi-level stool. They've already conserved. I mean, if that's a case study in itself, Monterey is the most conservingist area in the state of California. But then also they're looking at recycled water as well as a desal component now too.
Well, it's interesting. Our water infrastructure in California is truly bizarre. We're taking water from all the way to the north, bringing it all the way to the south, bringing it from over there, over here, everywhere. We've stolen rivers from communities and brought it to big cities. I guess, is there a movement to kind of bring, more local sustainable water projects so we don't have to take water from up here and move it down there?
It's just hard of how we're
stuck.
Yeah. How we're
stuck in our way.
Communities are made up. I mean, you're never going to get the water you need out in the desert communities. San Diego is a great example of that. They just don't have a great natural fresh water supply. They need to have imports to be able to meet the demands there. And it's interesting bringing it back to a public policy perspective of when you're building new housing, are you making sure that they have the water supply they need, not in the short term, but really in the long term to be able to serve all those new houses? So it's a balance between, we see a lot of communities saying, oh, we can't build anymore because we don't have enough water supply. Right. Well, have we really evaluated or using that as an excuse? And maybe there are some parts of the state where we should really be thinking about not building there because the long-term water outlook is pretty bad.
So are you brought into all these conversations about housing and homelessness and all this.
Yeah. Oh, God. We just had a conversation about homelessness. I mean, it's really hard for the water utility industry to figure out what our role is in homelessness. But we want to have a solution to everything, right? We want to play a role if we can. But what we've done is all of our large publicly traded companies all have a charitable arm to them. Mm-hmm. And we've really made a big push to try to do water bottle refueling stations. And that's how we feel like we're achieving the human right to water for all. That's helping homelessness. We're putting them in public places, partnering with cities where they can make sure that someone can go and fill up their bottled water.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on. Definitely learned a lot. Very interesting stuff. I'm glad I can drink out of the tap.
Yes.
And don't have to waste money on plastic bottles.
You heart tap water. I heart tap water. We should all heart tap water.
Yeah, definitely awesome. Our kids go to school together. Yeah. And I was telling my son, I was like, I'm going to have Tommy's mom and she's going to be on my YouTube channel.
Yep.
So, you're saying that your son DJ really wanted a shout out on YouTube.
Shout out to my kids, Tommy and DJ. Here I am on a podcast.
Make sure you kids like and subscribe and give her a thumbs up. Right. Definitely. So
I'm competing with Dan TDM right now.
I know. You definitely, get the likes out, kids. Yeah. So great. Awesome, Jennifer. All right. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.
We'll touch up base again sometime soon.
Great. Right. Thank you.